Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. This Michigan football program heading into 2025, it has to be the most polarizing football team that we see in the country. And I'm not even talking about the off the field stuff that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. I'm talking about this Michigan team in 2025. How do we evaluate them? What are they going to be in 2025? People are all over the place. We talked about this earlier this week as we wrap up the spring transfer portal, as we wrap up spring practice. You're starting to see these top 25 rankings come out. You're starting to see college football playoff predictions come out. You see Michigan all over the place. You'll see some people putting Michigan in the college football playoffs. You'll see some people putting Michigan outside of the top 20. How do we evaluate this team? What are the expectations for this football team? More importantly, what's the pathway to the college football playoffs for Michigan? Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm gonna come out and say it. Like, as a Michigan fan myself, the expectations going into 2025 is go make the college football playoffs and go make some noise. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. Because I understand, even Michigan fans are kind of all over the place in terms of expectations. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. I think Michigan has the roster to do so. I think they have the schedule to do so as well. Now, what needs to happen with this football team? Just as importantly, what needs to happen with the schedule for Michigan to go out and make that happen? That's the conversation that I want to get into before we do. And as always, the Michigan fans, y'all let it fly in the comments section. We've said this a lot. I truly mean it. As a Michigan fan, it's been extremely fun talking this football team in spring practice, in the winter transfer portal window. The amount of support that y'all have shown the fellas the last couple of months has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We got a lot on the horizon, especially as we get into official visit season, talking the recruiting front. So if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. 8.5 wins is the win total projection for Michigan. If Michigan is going to outperform the preseason projections, what needs to happen? Here's probably the most frustrating part for me listening to, some other people talk Michigan. I feel like the conversation's a little bit too much around Bryce Underwood. And that and many of y'all are probably looking at me and like, what do you mean? You've talked about Bryce Underwood pretty much the whole spring. Yes, that's true. Bryce Underwood's a massive part of the equation when you're talking about Michigan making the college football playoffs. He needs to play good football. Ain't no question about that. What I mean is, if there's one thing that I think we all learned during spring, and we've said this a lot, is Bryce has the talent to go make it happen year one as a freshman. To me, the bigger question I have about this football team is what's around Bryce Underwood? Like, do we give him a good enough run game? Do we have pass catchers on the outside that step up and go make plays for the young quarterback? Chip Lindsey. Like, how well is Chip Lindsey able to build an offense around Bryce that puts this kid in comfortable spots in the 2025 year? Those are more of the concerns that I have for Michigan than Bryce Underwood being good enough. Look, I watched Bryce Underwood since he's been a freshman in high school. We've heard about what Bryce Underwood looked like in the spring. I think in fact, I know that Bryce Underwood is good enough to be a successful quarterback year one. I'm a little bit more concerned about what's around Bryce, specifically in the run game. One of the things that, and we'll move on pretty quickly because I want to talk the schedule a little bit more. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot around this Michigan team, I feel like the floor for this Michigan offense is significantly higher than what it was in 2024. And I think some of y'all are looking at me and saying, well, what do you mean the floor is higher with the true freshman quarterback? What I mean by that is, one, let's not act like this Michigan team was taking care of the football last year. I mean, they were outside of the top 70 in turnovers per game. They weren't even throwing the football down the field. They were still turning the football over. And so I don't think the turnovers are that big of a deal in terms of transitioning from Jack Tuttle / Davis Warren / Alex Orji to Bryce Underwood. The turnovers were a problem in 2024. In fact, with the, ideally a better run game, better offensive coordinator, ideally the turnovers maybe go in the right direction for this Michigan offense in 2025. But what I mean by the floor is higher, you have a quarterback because of the athlete Bryce, he can make stuff happen when it's not perfect. That was the biggest problem with Michigan in 2024. The quarterback play, specifically with a guy like Davis Warren, if it was not perfect when you were asked to make high level throws or when you were asked to create outside the pocket because the pocket got muddy, Davis Warren couldn't do that. And that was something that made J.J. McCarthy such an exceptional quarterback for this team in 2023. When it was time to make those game-changing plays that you needed to have to go win national championships, when it was time to go extend plays, when the pocket, the pass protection breaks down, like how good of an athlete are you? How well are you able to, what Jim Harbaugh used to always say, make wine out of water? J.J. McCarthy was always doing that. I think you get that from Bryce Underwood in 2025, even as a freshman. This kid is going to step foot on the football field and be one of the best pure athletes on the football field. That's going to supply Michigan a higher floor on offense because it doesn't need to be perfect every play for Michigan to make some things happen on offense. To me, again, it's the run game. I think there's a lot of people that are concerned with the pass catchers. And look, as a Michigan fan, I am too. Like, I don't think this is an elite wide receiver room in the Big Ten, at like what we see on paper right now. You give Michigan, you give Bryce Underwood a good run game. That's the engine of this offense. Like, the engine of this offense is Bryce Underwood and what he can do with his legs, and Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. Those are your three best players on offense, I think, going into 2025. If Michigan can run the football, I think they'll be okay on offense. And then I go to the defensive side of the football, and look, there's a lot of people in the national media that will tell you this Michigan defense takes a step back because they lose guys like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Will Johnson. Go back to that Alabama game. In fact, go back to the back half of November, how this defense was finally clicking with Wink Martindale as the defensive coordinator. It just looked like a different defense than what we saw in September. Not to say the Michigan defense in September was bad. It just kind of reached another gear when you played teams like Ohio State, when you played Alabama in the bowl game. Like, go back to that Alabama game. Mason Graham wasn't on the field. Will Johnson wasn't on the field. Michigan still had a very good performance on the defensive side of the football. That tells me that this defense just felt a little bit more steady and comfortable with Wink Martindale towards the end of the year. And that, to me, only gets better in 2025 going into year two. You're a deeper team than you were last year on defense. Yeah, you might not have the high end upside players. I don't know if we're going to have two picks that are top 15 in the NFL draft like we did last year with Mason and Kenneth, but I think you're a more complete team. Now, the schedule is the conversation I want to get into, specifically early on. Look, you got a really tough out of conference matchup with Oklahoma week 2. Outside of that, very gettable schedule, especially within the Big Ten, where you play Ohio State at home, I remind you, towards the end of the end of the year. You also don't play Penn State, don't play Oregon, like two of the other kind of top tier teams in the Big Ten as we roll into 2025. What I want to look at here is the first 4 football games. What can Michigan do here? Like, this, to me, has a large impact on whether Michigan makes the college football playoffs or not. 4-0 I get it's lofty because that means you're going on the road with a true freshman quarterback and beating an Oklahoma team that's going to have a very good defense. And it means you go on the road to Lincoln, Nebraska and get a win there too. If you can make that happen, Bryce Underwood's only going to get better as the year goes on, especially with the new offensive coordinator and Chip Lindsey. Now, you look at New Mexico and Central Michigan. Look, if they struggle or don't win those football games, then we got some other problems in college football playoffs for us Michigan fans. On the road at Oklahoma, because I look at that Nebraska game and look, this is no disrespect to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I think they will be a solid team in the Big Ten. I have trouble seeing Nebraska block up Michigan's pass rush, and I have trouble seeing Nebraska stop Michigan's rushing attack. And Nebraska's got some big-time question marks on the defensive line. They got some question marks on the offensive line as well. I like a lot of portions of this Nebraska team. I like Dillon going into year 2. I don't know if they can deal with what Michigan has in the line of scrimmage, specifically that Michigan pass rush. The Oklahoma game, this is going to be, at least in my opinion, and we're going to take plenty of deep dives into this football game before it actually kicks off. It's going to be a rock fight, in my opinion. You know, you got a really good quarterback there in John Mateer. You got a really good offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle, and you got a really good defense that Brent Venables is going to call that defense in 2025. You were going on the road with a true freshman quarterback playing what I think should be a top 25 defense in the country. I struggle to see Michigan scoring over 30 points. I would maybe even struggle to see Michigan scoring over 21 points. But on the flip side here, I would probably struggle to see Oklahoma run it up and down on this Michigan defense too. This is an Oklahoma offense that was one of the worst in the Power 4 last year. They still have massive concerns on the offensive line. And although they have a difference maker at quarterback now with John Mateer and what I think is a really good offensive coordinator, can Oklahoma have the offensive line to block up guys like Derek Moore, guys like TJ Guy, guys like Rayshon Benny on the inside? I think it's going to be a low scoring game where I think explosive plays are going to be the difference. And this is where Bryce Underwood comes in. Even as a true freshman going on the road to Norman, Oklahoma, it might be a little bit rocky. It might not be super consistent for Bryce Underwood, but can his playmaking ability, can he find enough of those big time plays to allow Michigan to get over the hump in that football game? Because if you do, and you go 4-0 to start the year going into your bye week, you're going into the month of October undefeated. Again, Bryce Underwood's only getting better, but you scroll down and say, you start to see a lot of games that Michigan can kind of rattle off here, like Wisconsin at home. You got to like Michigan by more than a touchdown. At USC is tricky because I think you're going across the country. One, I think this USC team is much improved. That's going to be a game to certainly circle on October 11th. Washington at home, they got to come across the country and play Michigan. I think we'll boat race Michigan State, whether we play them in East Lansing, whether we play them in Ann Arbor. Boat race Purdue. Again, you're looking at going into the month of November with maybe one loss. And then you scroll into the month of November and say, hey, Northwestern, Maryland, those should be wins. And then you get Ohio State at home, and Ohio State team that. Look, Ohio State's going to be good. I don't think any of us are getting up here and saying Ohio State ain't going to be a good football team. They got a lot to replace on both sides of the football. You find a way to beat that Oklahoma team. And I think it's off to the races because that's a very gettable schedule in the month of October and in the month of November leading up to that Ohio State game. You put yourself in a spot where you're 1-2 loss team going into Ohio State. Yeah, college football playoffs, certainly a conversation. And that's not to overlook a team like Washington or a team like USC. But if this Michigan team can find a way to win that football game on the road in Norman, Oklahoma, I think it opens up in a big time way for this Michigan team. There's a path to the playoffs on the schedule. I think this Michigan team has enough on their roster because your defense is going to keep you in almost every single. In fact, I think it's going to keep you in every single game you play. I don't see a single offense on this schedule that is going to just run up and down. You're going to be in these games, and now can you have quarterback play from Bryce that gives you enough juice, enough playmaking ability to get us over the hump? It's the conversation. I'm not going to get up here and say people are sleeping on Michigan because everybody's talking about us. But I think this is a team that I think can surprise a lot of people with the upside going into 2025. And I get the concerns. I get the question marks. It's hard to burn the memory of that Michigan offense in 2024 out of our memories. I think there's something here, and we'll see, and we'll obviously talk a lot more about it in the summer rolling into the fall. Michigan fans, I'm fired up to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section in terms of expectations around this Michigan team in 2025. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.